Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jessie Milestone. I am your God Empress. And guys, I did it. I joined the millions. I went out and I saw the Barbie movie. I did. I saw it late on a Monday night in a still very crowded theater with a lot of dudes, and they were all laughing. So that was the theatrical going experience I had seeing the Barbie movie, and now I got some big old truth bombs to drop on you about it. But first, before we get into that, two very important things to get out of the way, although they're kind of little truth bombs each and of themselves. And the first most important thing to understand before we go ahead and discuss the Barbie movie is that this is not a woke propaganda film, guys. It's not. It just fundamentally, de facto, is not. And you kind of need to accept that in order to move forward with any rational discourse about it. And how do I know that it's not? Well, guys, because people are talking about whether or not it is. Right there. I didn't have to see the goddamn film, which you could. We could sit here if you did see, and we could split hairs over all the minutiae in the film and what's woke and what isn't, and what is wokeness anyway. Is it just anything that's further to the left than you are? Is it just anything that has themes about women or minorities, or is wokeness actually some sort of objective definition that we've yet to nail down? I don't fucking care. I really don't, because that's not about this. The point is that we're having those discussions, right? We're trying to figure out what this is relative to the Barbie movie, and people are not agreeing with it, which means it's very obviously not a single-minded piece of propaganda beating people over the head with the same message. And look, if you can't accept that, then you need to go out and do the thing we used to say was take a hike, and I believe the kids call it touching grass these days. Either way, you need to go do that. You need to go do some of that. You need to get yourself a fresh dose of reality, maybe a little nature in there, because the world is not as black and white as you're experiencing it. It's not, which brings me to my next point. Embrace the dialectics, because both things can be true, guys. It can be true that this movie has feminist themes and that it's also an objectively good movie. That's possible. That's actually a very distinct possibility. It's also equally distinctly possible that I can have seen this movie and found it wildly entertaining and of solid quality, and that you can see this movie and find it horrifically offensive and terrible. And that's fine. That's totally fine, because we're allowed to live in this world where both things can be possible. We are. And that's really sort of the point here. The point is not whether you should like this movie or you shouldn't. The point is it was made, it exists, a lot of fucking people do. Everyone has the right to dislike it and say whatever they want about it, but a lot of people are kind of acting like this movie is bad and shouldn't exist, and that's just a little bit crazy talk. This movie is just for a very specific audience, right? Another dialectic here, right? This is another thing that this movie asks you to embrace. It asks you to come along with its core premise, which is that, yeah, the world is different from how it was when Barbie was invented. We have made great strides in women empowerment and great gains on that in that field, but we're also not there yet. We're not in the idealized version of pure equality. That's the core tenet that this film decides, and that's what I happen to agree with. I happen to agree that we have made amazing and great strides towards the equality of sexes, equality of a lot of other peoples, etc. And I also see a lot of fucking problems in this world that a lot of it stem from those very same issues. And so that's something I can agree with. And if that message is just so not for you, is so screamingly against, your values, then you might not like this movie. You might not. It's very possible. But just keep in mind that if you're one of those people out there raging and screaming and raving that this movie is so woke and so evil, or you're also equally out there raging that this movie is like the most feminist triumph of all time, you're really revealing a lot more about yourself and what you see in the world than kind of anything else. So bear those things in mind for this big old fat truth bomb, this big old piece of knowledge, right? This big movie, this movie of the summer, as people are calling it, this movie that is driving people crazy or sending them out into theaters in droves that people can't stop talking about. Guys, this movie, it's just a chick flick, all right? It's a comedy. It's a satirical comedy, actually quite a good satire, very much obviously a parody of Utopia and Voltaire's Candide, but we'll get to that later. It's a comedy at its heart, all right? It's a irreverent comedy, as irreverent as Josie and the Pussycats, and it's essentially almost the same movie as Life Size, just with, a different budget. Thematically, so similar. The journey, so similar. A lot of the core tenets and elements of the movie, so similar. And I really don't remember anybody getting so fucking butthurt and outraged when Life Size came out. Now, maybe it's because it wasn't the blockbuster smash hit that Barbie is, but it has enjoyed itself a good old cult following since then. And I still have not heard any of the retroactive outrage about how Life Size ruined our culture with all of its feminist bullshit. Likewise, Josie and the Pussycats 100% dunks on men and capitalism for like the entire fucking movie. And I again, it's beloved classic. So we used to have this understanding that sometimes movies that were made with a female-centric audience in mind could dunk on men, and it was okay because, yeah, girl power, and like that wasn't a problem. Like that wasn't a problem back in the day, just like it wasn't a problem to have, male-driven comedies that made jokes at women's expenses and were all about bros coming together and having a good time. Both of those things should be able to exist. I know everyone's like, well, the male ones can't exist anymore, so why should they be? Wrong! False. Incorrect. Yes, some things got canceled. Yes, certain things shifted and changed in the zeitgeist, but go out there, guys. That shit's still out there. It still exists. It's still being made. Fucking Mission Impossible, the newest Mission Impossible film, up there also enjoying. I don't know if that one did well at the box office. I'm not going to lie. I really don't know. But it's out there. It existed. It happened. Tom Cruise is very proud of it. And there's absolutely no fucking feminism in that movie whatsoever. So calm down. The world's not being taken over by vaginas because Barbie did well at the box office. It's okay. It's okay that the movie exists. It's okay that people like it. And it's okay if you don't. Like, all of those things are fine. What's ridiculous, what's absurd to me is the people going out there and getting outraged that there are jokes in this movie at men's expense or that there are female empowerment messages. Guys, it's a chick flick. It's so obviously made with a female-centric audience in mind. That doesn't mean men can't go see it or shouldn't go see it or can't enjoy it. Many men have. I've talked to some personally. That just means that some of the jokes, some of the material is going to be geared towards women. It's just going to happen. It's just like, a lot of other movies, like war movies, have categorically and typically been made with a male audience in mind. Now, that's, again, hysterical that people like Ben Shapiro are getting their panties in a wad over what are obviously jokes. I mean, this movie ends as irreverently as it begins, and this movie is a reference start to finish, and so of course it's going to end on a stupid joke about what's a real woman going to do as her first rite of passage. Go to the gynecologist, which is actually very relevant because as any woman who came of age knows, the going to the gynecologist can be a very traumatic first experience and is also very ensconced in many, many stereotypical and exaggeratedly hilarious ways as a rite of passage in womanhood. So to revisit that as a callback to the jokes about the plastic mounds earlier in the film as the movie's closing punchline, that's what it is. It's not some fucking comment on the value of women in society, Ben. Although I can see how you could be confused, since you seem to be confused about whether or not the movie was a comedy in the first place. You also seem to be confused as to what your role is in this whole societal commentary thing anyway, because what it sounds like you're doing, it sounds like you're having a meltdown and getting your panties in a wad over the fact that a movie was made without you in mind and didn't make all of its jokes and humor pandering to you specifically. Now, it's funny because I feel like you have had a lot to say about women who've made those same complaints, because let's be honest, this is a thing, right? Yeah, why isn't it more joke things for me? This is a woke thing to go around and complain that why isn't this movie more for me? Why isn't this movie that has no right to be about you or for you in any way, shape, or form because it's so clearly about something else, to complain that it's not for you? That's classic fucking wokeness, Ben Shapiro, okay? And to all the other men running around there doing that. And it's like, why wasn't the Barbie movie more for me? Why didn't it have more jokes that I liked? Why didn't it have jokes that I found offensive or didn't think were funny? You are literally just becoming the parody of the same thing you rail against, okay? So stop, because it's not a good look. It's not a good look. It's okay if the jokes in this movie weren't for you. It's totally fine. But here's the thing. This movie is not a litany against men, okay? And I know that a lot of people miss this because this is a great thing about satire, right? People are stupid and they don't understand what satire is. And this movie has a great satirical through line with Ken and the men, the Kens. The Ken journey is not the journey of men in society. It's actually a metaphor for the journey and role of women in society. So when you look at it through that lens, when you look at it that way, kind of all makes sense, right? And we get that in the beginning. It's very obvious in the beginning how Barbie's living in this utopia. Although people did miss this. Like, people legitimately did miss the fact that this, like, hilarious utopia of Barbie land is supposed to be a stereotypical, like, overblown, like, 1950s style patriarchy, just with the women in those roles and the men in other roles. Like, Ken only has a good day if Barbie pays attention to him, and his entire life is about pleasing and impressing her and doing things to support her and not having any real job or value of his own, right? It's a metaphor for women in society at, say, the time Barbie was invented. And so, like, the same way that Barbie was supposed to go change society and make it better for that, we're supposed to be watching the journey of women gain their empowerment through the lens of Ken and the male dolls. Interesting, because makes it a lot easier to swallow that way, or process or watch, without realizing you're getting beaten over the head with a message, which clearly nobody did, because they all felt beaten over the head with the opposite message because people are too stupid to understand satire. But seriously, follow this down the path, right? So Ken goes off and discovers, there's another way to be. And patriarchy, of course, is a metaphor for, the matriarchy. And so what happens to the earliest forms of these liberated men, see liberated women, when suddenly they had the opportunity to run amok? They were just like their counterparts, and they made everything oppressive and shitty, and sought immediately to subjugate the other people and put them into the very roles they themselves had resented. Just like a lot of angry, not real feminists do in the real world. Isn't that weird how that goes? Isn't that so strange how that works? And so then eventually, and then same thing too, where the women are the men in this world. And so when the women are having these moments of it'd be great if I didn't feel this pressure to be awesome all the time, or the same jokes of I'm so good at this thing and I don't even know why, I'm just a lawyer because I'm great at it, is the joke about how previously the same thing Ken is trying to experience in the real world. Everything's so easy for me. In Barbie world, it's so easy for them. It's supposed to be a metaphor for when, the gender roles were very firmly reversed. And then we come to the end of this movie, right, after going through the equally, by the way, not satisfactory real world, where Ken walks around the way, an empowered woman would do, saying, hey, give me this thing because I'm a man. The joke here is not the patriarchy, guys. The joke is women who walk around today acting like the world owes them something for being a woman. And so even though they're not qualified for certain things, they're still acting entitled to it because as, the matriarchy, we have to take it back and have the power. That's the joke, guys. That's the joke. It's actually not a joke at men's expense. It's a joke at rabid, power-hungry faux feminists. But yeah. Whatever, satire. It's fun, guys. It's fun. And so the whole point is that you're seeing this journey through Ken's eyes, and you're seeing the injustices through Ken's eyes that we can all look at and go, yeah, that's pretty fucked up and unjust. And it's actually a metaphor for the other way around. Ha ha! Look at that. But the whole point is this is not all to say that the matriarchy is bad, the patriarchy is bad, one is worse than the other, one is the evil, is the root of evil on this earth, but to say that the journey forward is just take care of your own shit. Tend your own garden. Which brings me to my next point, if y'all are paying attention. Satire. Guys, I mentioned Candide in the beginning. There it is again. But first, Utopia. Utopia. Now, it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch to think that Greta Gerwig had some inklings, understandings of these works in the creation of this interpretation of Barbie, because her last movie was Little Women. She ostensibly can read and has read books. And Utopia, Thomas More's Utopia, Voltaire's Candide are not exactly unknown literary texts. Though if you're not familiar, Utopia literally translates to no place, nowhere. It's the joke. Nowhere. And just like the Barbie movie, Thomas More's Utopia faces a lot of split criticism on what this actually means. Is this an honest litany? Is this an honest proposal of socialism, or is this a satire of both the current state of affairs in England at the time and socialism as a solution? And people tear their hairs out of this all the time, and I think it's to me it's pretty apparent that it's both, that it's lampooning both, and that it's taking an aim at both extremes and saying neither of these things can be truly the best, because when you take a look at them in their extremist forms, one, the corruption going on in England right now, and two, the absolutely austere monastic impersonal and feelingsless existence of Utopia, neither of these things could possibly be correct or the path towards true happiness. And that, I think, is reflected very, very clearly in the Barbie movie, in the way that it takes aim at Barbie world as not the solution, and the real world as not the solution either. And that the reality is that the fix is somewhere in between, and that takes us to Candide, right? And that's the sort of exploratory element of Margot Robbie and Ken, both Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling's character, Barbie and Ken, and obviously going into the real world is your Candide-esque adventure. So the real world, by the way, by this token, is not the real world either. So everyone getting their panties in a wad again about, well, the real world is depicted like so stereotypically sexist and male-centric. It's not even real. It's not even the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, no shit, guys. It's satire, all right? When Candide goes out into the world in Voltaire's famous satires of the same name, he goes out and gets shit on in the most absurdly ridiculous ways, the most absurd things happen to him that never could possibly happen. He survives in these ways, and the people that he kills or nearly kills or get killed survive in these totally outlandish and absurd and bizarre ways, and all of these things have to happen. All these incredible pressures have to happen to press Candide into the paradigm shift that he's going for. And so this is exactly what happens when Barbie and Ken go into the real world, right? They go on this Candide-esque adventure, each separately, where they get bombarded, bitch slapped in the face with a heavy dose of reality in its exaggerated hyperbolic version, and it's just the dose of reality that they each individually need to have the paradigm shift to see the world in less black and white terms and move forwards so they can do what Voltaire ultimately advises at the end of his book, which is, quote, tend your own garden. Figure out what makes you happy, figure out what's right for you, figure out how you interact with the world, and fucking live in it that way. And so that guys, that is the message that the Barbie movie is really trying to get across. Be your own person. Just like, all right, Life Size, or Josie and the Pussycats, or any of these great irreverent girl power movies that have come before it. The message is the fucking same as it's always been. Be your own person, be powerful, don't let nobody tell you what to do, and just you go, girl. Just go, girl. Does it get preachy at moments? Yes, it gets preachy at moments. I don't think it's anything, to me personally, some people found it very overhanded, some people didn't like that, and that's cool. I did not find it terribly overhanded, I just found it long-winded at points. Like, all right, America Ferrera, you give that speech. It's pretty relatable, but I'm over the emotional response before you're even done talking. So that's like the biggest criticism I can levy. And also, like, Will Ferrell just plays Will Ferrell. And so if you're not here for that kind of like ridiculous caricature, which like is a little bit, sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb because he really is playing parody in a satirical universe, and it's a little too over the top for my taste in a lot of parts. But aside from that, you know, it's a funny comedy. It's got its flaws, it's got its highlights, it's got a lot of good jokes, and I think it really has that subtle satire that used to be a through line in a lot of otherwise fluffy and irreverent comedies. And so to me it's really refreshing because this movie just reads like something that would have come out, you know, 10, 20 years before, back at a time when we could all like appreciate things a little bit more easily and lightheartedly. And that's really my big takeaway, guys. You know, you don't have to see it. Based on everything I've said about it, you can probably figure out if you're going to like it or not. And if you're going to like it, great, go fucking see it, go enjoy it. If you're curious, if you want to weigh in, if you have your own thoughts, you know, go see it, make a commentary of your own. And if it's just not for you, then don't see it. There's a ton of other movies that are. So that's it, guys. That's all I got to say. And just don't ever forget, I don't know anything, but I do know more than you. God Empress out.